I am back for lesson 6.2. We're in our Unit 6 Ecology unit. And so today we're going to be talking about interactions between organisms. So keep in mind that you should be following along on your study guide. And you're writing the things that are bold. And then I may talk through the other stuff that's not bold, but you do not have to write anything that is not already bolded for you. Unless I miss something, and usually I'll catch it in the video and be able to tell you. So throughout this lesson, this is actually one of our shorter ones, ways that species can interact. And we've got 3 different types of interactions that we're going to be talking about: competition, predator-prey interactions, and then symbiosis, and different forms of symbiosis. So starting off with competition. This occurs when 2 different species or just 2 different organisms use the same limiting resources that they both require for survival. So organisms can compete with members of their own species. It doesn't have to be with another species. 2 males, for example, may compete for a female. All kinds of interspecies competition that can exist. And then you're also going to have lots of instances where one species is competing with another for maybe for a habitat, or the area where they're going to be able to live, the area where they're going to feed, the type of food that they're going to eat. Lots of things that they would compete over. All right. So again, interspecific competition, individuals of different species competing for the same resources, and there are 2 different outcomes for how this can work. You don't have to be writing anything down off of this page, but I do want to mention it anyway. So the 2 different ways, the first one is one species excludes the other. This is called competitive exclusion, and this is where one species thrives more. They do a better job at hunting. They one reason or another, they win. It's a competition, and they win the competition, and the other gets excluded, and that the population of that second species, the losing species, will decline and maybe even completely be eliminated within that ecosystem. The other thing that can happen, and often does, is that they can coexist. This is called resource partitioning. And this happens when they share resources. Maybe they become very specialized in how or when they hunt. For example, they may eat the same thing, but one of them may look for that food during the day, and the other does it at night. Lots of different ways that this can work out, but they adapt in a way that allows them to be able to coexist in that environment, even though they are technically competing. Sorry, not sure what's going on there. All right, now we come to predator-prey interactions. Predation is when one species consumes another. Uses the words kill there, but that's not always the case, because you also have instances of herbivory, which is a form of predation where organisms will eat algae or plants. Remember that those are considered living organisms, and they are less able to defend themselves, but they still do have some ways that they adapt to defend themselves as well, whether it be spikes or toxins within the plant, or other things that allow them to some extent to be able to protect themselves. Some are obviously better at it than others. So predation, one species eating, consuming another. Trophic relationships here. We're going to use this word trophic a lot in another lesson, so we're not going to get into great detail here. Notice how it's not bold. It's a web of indirect interactions, which means that an effect on one species may flow through an ecosystem. It's called a trophic cascade. Something happens to the algae within a marine ecosystem, then something is going to happen to everything within that that ecosystem. They are all impacted by each other within that ecosystem. Now we'll take a look at selection. So in some situations, selection is going to act to weed out individuals that are too far from the optimal balance for success. We're not going to talk about this a lot right now because it is a bigger part of what we talk about in Unit 7. It is going to come up again. But just note here, see the giraffe, the check mark next to the one whose neck is long enough to reach, and then the other two with the shorter necks. Those other two with the shorter necks are not going to survive long enough to be able to reproduce, and will not be able to pass on the optimal gene that will allow the giraffe to fill its niche within the ecosystem. Because selection plays a significant role there within a species of which organisms are going to survive. And you are writing this part now. So selection when conditions change, such as the physical environment or the adaptations of competitors. Right? If you're competing for food, you eat the same thing as another animal who adapts and gets better at that eating food, then now selection is taking place. You've got to adapt as well, or you will not be able to survive. So when conditions change, like the physical environment or the adaptations of competitors, predators and prey, the optimal balance changes, and then selection will drive evolution. The species now has to adapt because things around it have changed. Notice that, and this is something we'll talk about again in greater detail, notice that organisms don't adapt, species do through passing on optimal genes. This form of selection is called directional selection. Natural selection favors prey that have a mechanism for getting away from a predator, such as being fast and elusive, or being camouflaged, or having protective spines or shells, all kinds of other defensive structures. And here's the part that we want you to write. When one species evolves, it responds to the other, and this is known as coevolution. So the prey gets a little bit faster. If that's the main part of the diet for the predator, they've got to either learn to eat something else, or they now have to adapt and get a little bit faster too. So the fastest of that species will survive to be able to pass on their genes, because the ones that are too slow will not be able to catch food and will die unable to reproduce. So the fastest ones survive and they reproduce, and now their offspring are fast too. And so the species evolves and adapts over time, and it's done so in response to the fact that it's prey adapted. This is coevolution, two species adapting together. Moving on to symbiosis. This is our last box. We've got three types of symbiotic relationships. The first one is mutualism. This is where both species benefit. We give a couple of examples as we go, but this is just the basic definitions for you to write first, and then I'll further elaborate. So if any of these don't quite make sense yet, it's okay. We'll talk about them a little bit more. So mutualism, both species benefit. Commensalism is where one species benefits, but there's no apparent effect on the other, good or bad. An example that we have here is barnacles living on a whale. There might be a benefit or a harm to the whale, but we're not sure. We know that there's benefit to the barnacle that is living on the whale. We're not aware of anything good or bad impact that it has on the whale itself. And then parasitism, where one species benefits and the other is harmed. To continue using that whale, an example would be if the whale had a tapeworm in its gut. The tapeworm is benefiting from that relationship and being inside the gut of the whale, eating the food. There is no benefit to the whale. It is harming the whale. Not sure what is happening with these slides today. All right, so to break it down, I think this chart is helpful. You are not required to copy this down, but if you wanted to, you could print this slide out. You can copy this chart down. But I think that this does a good job of helping break it down and helping us to understand it. So again, commensalism, the receives the benefit and the other is unaffected. Mutualism, both receive the benefit, and parasitism, one receives the benefit, the other is harmed. And the smiley faces here do a pretty good job too. Commensalism, one is happy, the other is neutral. Mutualism, both are happy. And parasitism, one is happy and the other is dead, is being killed by the relationship. Here's an example of mutualism. We've got our remora here, and they are cleaning off our whale shark here. Both are benefiting from this relationship. Example of parasitism, this is our isopod. It is a parasite that eats the tongue of the fish and basically pretends to be the tongue so that it can eat whatever the fish is eating. The fish then eventually does not get all the nutrients that it needs and does not be able to survive this for very long. Pretty nasty guy here. That is absolutely a parasite. And then commensalism, I did not make this slide. I don't necessarily agree with either of these 100%, but good examples of commensalism are hard to find. So we've got the clownfish living in the sea anemone, the clownfish being protected by the sea anemone, and not a whole lot of benefit that we're aware of it being there in that sea anemone. There are maybe some theories of about how that may not actually be the case, that the anemone may benefit. And then we've got the water buffalo there with the egret on top of it. The bird benefiting, the water buffalo may or may not be benefiting much. I think you can make the case that there is some benefit potentially there for him as well. Maybe the bird removing unwanted bugs from his face area, whatever the case may be. Those are possible examples of commensalism. And just to mention this real quick, nothing that you have to write down here, but facultative symbiosis is partners can live, they can live free without one another. They do not have to have that symbiotic relationship. They're benefiting from it, but they don't need it. Obligate symbiosis, if there's a partner that cannot survive without the other partner. And then in all cases, the smaller partner is known as the symbiont and the larger partner is known as the host. Probably aware of this if you have seen Venom. I believe we're going to leave it at that. We do have one more slide here for larval ecology. Really nothing that we need to know off of here, so we're going to leave 6.2 at that. Species interactions. Next time around, we will talk about major ocean environments for lesson 6.3. See you later. Have a good one. Peace.